Welcome to the Value Bridge podcast and our first of a two-part series today titled, Why the Hell Can't I Hire Anyone? If you are a recruiter in HR, a hiring manager, in any way, shape, or form connected with the hiring process or the CEO, hang the hell on, because you're about to find out a big reason why you can't hire anybody is you.
Welcome to the Value Bridge podcast by Aegis 360 Consulting. Our goal is to connect visionary leaders with down-to-earth insights to bridge the gap between leadership, culture, and strategy. While we learn, we will laugh and offer a roadmap for navigating the complex world of business. Enjoy and learn with guests that have been there and done that in uncovering strategies, triumphs, and challenges.
Good afternoon, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. It is afternoon.
It is afternoon. So full disclosure to all of our listeners, you are my daughter. So we'll just get that out of the way. Sam, Samantha Parks, right?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. And what we really want to talk about is that time that you graduated with your master's, your MBA, until you got your job. Now, that doesn't count the job working for me, because you came to work for me right away. But then we all knew going into that you were looking for, as you've always called it, your big kid job.
Yes.
Right? At a real company, not dad's company.
Well, you are a real company.
Well, thank you for saying that, honey. I appreciate it. But that's what we really want to talk about. But we always start our podcast with kind of a goofy little question to just get things warmed up.
Okay.
So you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't ask this of any other guest for obvious reasons. You'll understand why in a minute.
Oh, so this is special for me specifically.
It is very special for you.
Okay.
Yeah. What is one of the most ridiculous things your dad, me, has either said or done?
Okay. I got two.
Two.
Well,
awesome.
I have so many more. So
I know.
Do you want me to just,
No,
the whole podcast could just be that.
Yeah, we don't want that. We just, a couple are fine, or even one. That's fine.
So when we went to see this Savannah Bananas, that was last year.
Yeah, last year.
We were sitting down and we were watching the game, and my father,
me,
you, sat next to me and went, "Oh, they're the Savannah Bananas who were doing whatever at the time."
God, yeah, whatever is right. Yeah, who knows, right?
He went, "Oh, that's the team they're playing against. That's the serious team." And I went, "Yes, the serious team with a high monkey on their shirt and a cowboy hat and wearing bright pink, and some guy had a fishing net out there." And I was like, "That's serious team."
Yeah.
And when he said this, straight face, dead serious.
Yeah.
He meant the serious team.
Yeah, I did. I hadn't really taken in the entire scope of what was happening on the field.
It was
of play.
Quite a moment that I had.
Yeah. It was pretty
call
funny.
You on that.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. It caused me to kind of look at my shoes for a bit and then laugh, because I realized what a stupid comment it was.
I believe you went.
Yeah.
Eyes straight to the air. Yeah, the serious team.
Yeah. All right. So let's get down to business. So needless to say, let's just call it what it was. I can't remember, 2.5 years before you got hired in your present full-time job?
Oh, I started at Davie 3 years ago now.
Yeah, but I mean, from the time you graduated college until you went to Davie.
3 years.
So it was 3 years. So 3 years of trying to find a job. And it was painful, to say the least.
That's a really nice way of putting it.
It's an understatement, right? And in part two, by the way, Catherine Burek, who was your career coach and your job interview coach and whatnot, she's going to be on in part two and talk about it from her perspective, and not just your situation, but across the board with all our clients. But the thing that we both found I found aggravating on your behalf, and you found aggravating on your own behalf, was the dismal, absolutely horrid way that many organizations go about the hiring process, and how disorganized they are, and disrespectful, and non-communicative, and I guess we could go on, right?
Yep.
And it's painful for the applicant, but it's also painful to watch what you might consider a well-respected company act like complete idiots.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, at one point, I remember you hit the send button on one of your hundreds and hundreds of applications.
I don't even know how many I applied for, if I'm being honest.
And you literally picked up the computer and you shook it and looked at it underneath because there was no response. How many times did you just get, like, they didn't even send back, thanks for your application? I mean,
out of all of them, I would probably say that I didn't get like any response whatsoever, not even like a thanks for your application, it's under review, anything like that. Even just a thanks for applying, maybe 10 to 15%.
so not a lot.
Not a lot, but
But-
it should be zero.
It should be zero. Yeah, it 100% should be zero. And some of the other antics that these companies played, the applicant tracking systems that give you a 1 second, you hit the button and you get a response, you're not welcome here.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. What's that feel like? I mean, what's that?
Well, it's disheartening because nobody likes to be rejected, period.
Right.
But to send, hit send, get a thanks for applying, and then immediately after get a thanks but no thanks I was like, I know you didn't look at anything.
No, a computer did.
A computer looked at stuff. Not a single human being looked at my resume or my cover letter or on top of that, the resume that I submitted and then had to fill out everything on the resume.
Yes.
Within that, which is a whole different thing on top of that.
I can't even begin to tell you the number of times I heard you screaming about that. So tell the listeners a little bit what that's like. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of people that haven't looked for a job for a long time and they might not know what you're talking about. So you go into these systems and you have to do what?
If you've looked for a job within the last 6-ish years,
Right.
so it's been a little while, but not too long, they say you go to hit apply and they're like, attach your resume, and you attach your resume. And then the next page, it's like, now fill out your job experience. And I was like, why am I attaching my resume if I have to then fill out my job experience? And then, fill out your education. I was like, it's all on the resume that you asked me to attach.
So hours of work.
Hours. I would go to a coffee shop and I would spend 5 hours there just filling out application after application after application.
So some of the other frustrations you had were around the job descriptions themselves.
If I see one more job description that says entry level and then they require 5 years of experience, I'm going to throw something. I'm going to drive to that company's headquarters and find their HR department and be like, do you understand what entry level means? Because I don't think you do.
Yeah, interesting.
And I have my own theory about that. I think a lot of that came from the 2008 recession.
Okay.
When everybody lost their jobs because of that.
Right.
And then when things started to slowly pick back up, these people with 15, 20 years of experience didn't have those roles that were in that high space yet. They had entry-level jobs, so they're applying for these entry-level positions. And those companies were like, oh, we can get someone with 15 years experience in an entry-level position.
Oh.
And it's been how many years since 2008?
Yeah, quite a few.
Quite a few.
Right.
And that I think a lot of them are still in that mindset of being able to ask for an additional 5 years on an entry-level job. Entry-level is, I'm right out of college. I've never had an office job.
Right. I've never had a full-time real job with PTO and all that other stuff that goes with it. That's entry level.
Yeah. I've never done anything like this. And I tried to spin it a couple of times where I was like, well, I have, 2 years as a graduate assistant. So I could, when I was doing my master's, so I could sit there and go, I had 2 years here. So that's office level where I was working with all these places. And then before that, I had another 2 years as an RA where I had to plan all this stuff.
Right.
They were looking for like desk job at a corporate office.
Right.
5 years. And I was just like, I am 23.
Right.
I just graduated.
You
what do you mean?
To get a hat kind of thing. Yeah.
It's like,
exactly.
You need a job to get experience, but I won't give you the job to get experience. And it's just this vicious cycle that I was constantly in.
Yeah. It's just incredibly frustrating.
And it was everywhere.
It was everywhere. Yeah. And the other problem with that is when you read that, you either figure they don't know what they're talking about, or they didn't proofread their own job description and they just jammed it into or
they don't care.
Or they don't care.
Or they think that they can get more for less.
Right.
Which is another thing. Another bone I'm going to pick, which...
Yeah, pick away. They need to hear this, Sam. They need to hear it.
I am so frustrated, and I really think this just because I don't trust a lot of companies to do this on their own.
Okay.
Mine is, Davey does this, so obviously this isn't about Davey.
Right, of course not, yeah.
So I think this needs to be like a federal law where you have to be transparent about what you're paying.
Oh, that's a big hot topic right now.
Because if I'm going to apply for this job and I'm like, okay, this is the experience I have, this is the education I have, I think I should be around this range.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea if that's your range. And then you get into these interview roles, you finally get to talk to a human being.
Sure.
And you sit there and you're like, what is your range for, like, what are you looking to pay for this role?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, what are you looking to make? And I'm sitting there and I go, if I don't tell you the right number, you're going to write me off. Either I'm going to undervalue myself and you're going to go, oh, great, we're going to get this amazing person for a steal. Or I'm going to, in your eyes, overvalue myself. And you're going to go, oh, they're asking for too much money. They won't come down. And just write you off. Because I don't know what your range is.
When all along they knew this job was going to pay between $40,000 and $50,000 or whatever the number is.
They knew from the get-go when they posted it what the range was, how much they were going to pay this person, and what their budget was.
There.
Just put it out there.
Right.
It saves your time. It saves my time. Because if I get in there and I applied for a job that I'm like, oh, based on Glassdoor, this position should be making $50,000.
Right.
And then I get in there and they're like, we're going to pay you $38,000.
Right.
I'll be like, well, this was a great waste of my time.
Right. And their time.
And your time. Like,
right.
You went through my resume. You decided you wanted to talk to me. We set up this whole thing. That was a 30-minute phone interview. This was an hour in person. And now you're just telling me what your range is? Mm-hmm. That's hours wasted at that rate on both sides.
One of the things that I hear all the time from clients I talk to and people that are out there on the hiring side is, these candidates ghost us. These candidates ghost us.
Mm-hmm.
They won't return and they won't return.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find fascinating about that is just how much that happened to you. And the more I talk to people that are out there searching for a job, it's apparently happening the other way all the time.
I would say about 60 to 70% of the places that I applied, I would get the thanks for applying.
Right.
And then I would never hear anything else. Ever again. Or I would get like a phone interview and then I would never hear anything else ever again.
Right.
And that was, anytime I had an in-person interview, I would usually get a response at that point because they at least put like
some effort
into it.
Right.
But up through the phone interviews,
just nothing. Total ghosting.
And I would email them back and be like, hey, just checking in. I'm so really interested.
Right.
And I would never get a response.
Right. Just nothing. And let's for all of these bad experiences, one of my rules is on my podcast and some of my other stuff is I never give the name of the company that really screwed it up. Anybody does it well, I always give them a gold star in public, right? So we won't say names, but are there some of these organizations, because I know you applied to some state organizations, and that's as far as I'll go with that. A couple of higher ed, we'll just call it what
higher
it is.
ed.
We don't need to call them out. That ghosted you, and I know that on a couple of times you've said, that left such a bad taste in my mouth, I'll never do business with those people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just like some that you've just written off.
Yeah, there were a few that I never heard back from. I was like, well, if I ever have kids, if they're like, oh, I want to apply to this school, I'll be like, no, you're not.
Interesting. Yeah, that's just fascinating. Do you think if it got bad enough, you would make a decision to not do business with them in any way? I mean, not buy their gas or buy their groceries or whatever the kind of organization was.
I don't know if it will ever get quite that far.
Okay.
I mean, they would have to like really
be disrespectful. Yeah.
Like ghosting me is one thing. And it's like, I get that in my dating life. I get that with job applications. So like, whatever. But they'd have to like be truly like disrespectful to me and like to my face, or because I've heard horror stories from some friends who like applied somewhere and they had the phone interview and then that recruiter accidentally interviewed or emailed my friend.
Right.
And they were like, and they said all these horrific things about them from the phone interview.
What?
Yeah.
And they meant to email it to somebody else
And they meant to email it to somebody in the
Oh, my
company, and they
God.
just accidentally got their wires crossed somehow.
Oh.
And I heard about that, and I said, okay, so you're, so
It's
you,
not funny, but it's funny.
I was like, so you withdrew your application, right? And they're like, oh, absolutely, I did. Because they said all these horrible things. They're like, yeah, but I guess we'll continue on to an in-person. She emailed back, and she's like, no, you won't. I'm withdrawing my application. Have a nice day.
Oh.
And sent that over.
Read the header before you hit the send button, right?
Yeah.
Know who you're.
Double
Oh my gosh.
check everything before you hit send.
That's hysterical.
Always send emails as if it's going to be read in court one day.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Really good advice. So there was a company, and you had a very different experience with them. They did a phone screen, I remember, and then they called you back and said, we want you for an in-person interview. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, you got a letter in the mail, not an email, but I think they sent a letter with an agenda of exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, I mean, detailed out. And
Yeah.
it was very impressive to you. It was impressive to me.
It was a whole day thing.
Yeah.
Or at least it was a half day.
It was a half day, I remember.
Yeah, and they mailed me my, like, by the hour.
Right.
And they're like, okay, you're going to do this, and then you're going to get an interview here, and then you're going to
Talk to this person. And
you're going to get a tour of this place. And I remember getting that in the mail, and I went, what is this? Opened it. And I remember walking up to you and being like, have you seen this before, ever?
And, you know, and what I will tell you is how impressive, right? How to set the right stage of saying, we're dead serious about this hiring thing. And then you're going, wow, I'm pretty serious about it too. And you've just put your company in an incredibly good light.
Yeah, they were, obviously I didn't end up working for them, but they were one of the better experiences that I had. And by better, I mean like way up there. One of the people I interviewed with, I had some hot and cold with them that I was like, I feel like you don't want to be here and talking to me because I'm not have an X degree.
Right.
And so I remember sitting there talking to this person and going, I feel like you're going to say no strictly based off my degree and not what I can bring to the company.
Right.
And they were very interesting because they would be like really certain about something and be like, oh, so what about this? And like really warm. And I was like, I'm getting this.
Hot and cold.
Everything else was great. Everybody else I talked to was great. Yeah. It was just that person that I sat there and I went, this is such an odd experience.
Yeah. You know, and it was interesting, the observation of you going through that. And when you got your rejection letter from them, you were upset because it was like an interesting job and you thought you could really, learn and do something there. But you had a very different outcome from that, just personally going, well, okay, fine. They made a business decision. I don't happen to agree with it. But everything else was so professional, right, that it was like, oh, this was a positive experience out of a negative experience.
Well, that's one of the places that if I decided to do like a career change or move companies or somewhere, that's a place that I would
go back and talk to.
Like with this experience that I now have under my belt, I would throw my hat in the ring. Or if they reached out to me and said, hey, and they were like headhunting me, I would sincerely look at that and go,
sure,
maybe.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because you were so professional, right? So let me ask you this. Do you want them to tell you why they're not hiring you? Or do you not care? Or where are you on that? Now you're not searching for a job now and you haven't for quite a while, but when you were in that situation, do you sorry, but no thanks.
Back then I wanted to know because I wanted to know if it was like how I interviewed, if it was like if I came off, stilted or I wasn't expressing my interest or experience well enough or something like that. Now I still might just because it's interesting.
Sure.
What's really funny is this is the other thing, when everything would be great up to that point, I got the rejection. I would email back and be like, thanks for the opportunity. Is there any like feedback you can give me? Is there any specific reason why? And a lot of times it was just like, we just found someone slightly more qualified,
right.
better fit, whatever. And I was like, okay, well, because I literally got an email once that said, you were great. We just found someone that was just a step above.
Yeah.
And I can respect that.
Sure.
But what was fun was when I would get an email back and they said, nope. And I'm like, What do you mean no?
No what?
No what?
Right.
No, you're not going to give me feedback. No, you
Sure.
like what does no mean?
Yeah.
And I actually emailed somebody back once, and I was like, "Can I ask what no means?"
Right.
And they then never responded back.
Yeah, and the problem is they're so worried about because we live in a litigious society. They're so worried about somebody suing them that they don't. The less they say, their attorneys will tell them the better off you are. And I get that. I understand that to some degree, but I still think there's more that we can do when we reject somebody from a job.
Well, there's professional ways to do it.
Correct.
Like we just found somebody that was a better fit to the position, to the company, that had an additional degree or certificate that you didn't have.
Correct.
But everything else was great. Or I think I got one back that just said, she was so funny. She was like, everything was great. We chose someone who just had a little bit more experience. She's like, I want to give you some advice on when you interview. This was like really early in my process. She was like, you talk too much sometimes.
Oh, that's funny,
I
Sam.
emailed her back and I was like, thank you. Because I thought I did, but no one has ever told me that.
Well, and you don't know if you don't know, right? Especially when you're so new into the market, you've not had a lot of experience interviewing, so on and so forth.
Yeah, she told me that if they didn't have that other person, they probably still would have picked me. But she was just like, just for you, so you know in the future.
That, again, that is a person that I find professional and respectful. Mm-hmm. And it's like, thank you. That's actually quite helpful to me. And I would probably 100% want to interview with you again on something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're about midpoint. And so we ask kind of an off-topic question of interest about our guests.
Okay.
This is one you and I have talked about a lot, so it's not a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's just interesting for, somebody that's 30 years old. How many countries have you been to?
It's 23 now.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, 23. And you're about to add, you're planning a 2025 trip.
Yes.
And you're going to go, you think anyway.
I think I'm going to hit 2 more, so it'll bump me up to 25.
Okay.
I think I'm going to do Vienna.
Okay.
Mainly because I mentioned that to my roommate, and I don't want to say her name because I don't know if she wants to be mentioned.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I mentioned that to my roommate because she's thinking about coming with me, and she was like, we can go to the Spanish riding school. And I was like, yes. So I think
because you're both horse girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about that, and like the actual performance tickets are like $100 and some odd dollars.
Yeah, save your money.
Which makes sense, but their practice tickets are like 45 euros.
Oh, cool.
So
nice.
we were both even like, we kind of want to go see the practice over the performance.
Right. And
because I can go look up a performance on YouTube, but seeing them actually practice
would be cool.
Was really cool. And so like fly into Vienna, do that, train up to Budapest in Hungary.
And then fly home from there.
Either fly home from Budapest or train back to Vienna and fly back out of Vienna.
Okay. All right. Okay. So it's a disease that your mother and I gave you.
Yeah.
The disease of travel.
It started really early.
It did. It actually did. All right. So if you were to set up, if you were hired by a company and it said, Sam, we want you to set up our recruiting practices. What are some of the hallmarks, maybe 4 or 5 hallmark things that you would say, we're going to do this no matter what, right? This is just a standard. We're going to set the bar high. What are those 4 or 5 things?
No ghosting.
No ghosting. That's number 1.
That's number 1.
Right. Okay.
I think a human should touch every single resume, even if it's a quick glance.
Okay.
I think a human needs to touch everything that comes in.
Yeah.
Because as great as AI and computers are, they're only looking for keywords, and someone might not have those keywords that would be an extremely strong candidate.
Okay.
And that you won't know until you're reading it because you have that human element to it that a computer's never going to have as much as we want
no
them
ghosting.
To.
Human looks at it.
You said 4 or 5?
Yeah, 3 is fine. Just the big ones, the stuff that you really found aggravating.
I think if somebody requests feedback, what we talked about earlier, you should give feedback, even if it's like such a minor thing.
Right. Okay.
Just you expand upon an answer a little bit too much.
Sure.
would be fine. And, in a professional way, obviously.
Right.
Well, you sucked, so.
Right. Yeah. But that's
not
probably
quite
not
that.
the way to do it. All right. So those are three.
I think those would be the three main ones.
Well, I think if a lot of the practices that I see, if they did those three, they'd be 800 miles ahead of where they are now. So that couldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah.
As I tell clients all the time, and we don't do, our consulting practice doesn't do, we don't do recruiting, we don't do job searching, we don't do any of that. We always farm that stuff out. But as I tell them all the time, remember that the person you're talking to could become an employee. Mm-hmm. They could become a customer if they don't become an employee. They could become a vendor. If they are none of those three things, they're always a mouthpiece about your company. Mm-hmm. Give them something good to say.
Oh,
right?
Here's a fourth one.
Okay, bring it on.
Again, I'm harkening back to the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Post your wages.
Yeah, post the wages.
Post what you're going to pay.
Right.
And I know, especially recently within the last year, that's become more of an outcry.
It's really in the news a lot right now.
Because I know a good example is...
I think California, it's mandatory.
It's mandatory. Colorado, it's mandatory.
I didn't know about Colorado.
New York, it's mandatory.
Interesting.
There's half the states, it's mandatory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, at that point, just make it federal.
Yeah, just make it federal.
Just be done with it. Make it federal. Make everybody, it doesn't matter. Because when we, a really good example, when we posted... at Davie, we posted a position that was fully remote, so we posted it across the country.
Sure.
And because we had it in states that
was a requirement, you had to put that.
We had to put that in there. We didn't have an option.
We've talked about the 3 years of you trying to find a job and how rough that was, and then you hooked up with a recruiting company, mm-hmm. and they called you up and said, "Hey, we've got this." This company is a client of ours, the Davie Tree Company, mm-hmm. in Kent, Ohio, which is a national company and
international
in Canada mm-hmm. as well. And it was an incredibly smooth and professional, and you've been there for 3 years.
Yes.
And you're loving it.
Yes.
It's like awesome.
I have nothing but the highest of praises for how well that went. And it went through the recruiting company, but that just because it went through that doesn't mean that I still didn't have this whole process to do with Davie.
Right.
And so I think some people don't get that because they're like, well, you're with the recruiting company. I was like, yes, but I worked directly with Davie.
Well, you did.
While I was doing that.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think the thing that's important to point out here is the interaction with a quality recruiting company was quite mm-hmm. helpful.
Yes.
I mean, they give you good feedback. They helped you say this would be a good company or this one wouldn't. And they were really invaluable to you at that point.
Yeah, they really took my resume and mm-hmm. really looked at it, and they're like, we think you would be a good fit here, not here for various reasons.
Which is
and they met with
helpful.
Me, and they knew what I was looking for in a company.
Right.
So when the recruiting company reached out to me, and they're like, okay, we have this position at Davie. We think you'd be a good fit. Right. Are you interested? And I said yes.
Right.
And so they set up, I had a quick phone interview.
Right.
And then immediately after that, I had a face-to-face. It was via Teams mm-hmm. interview with my current boss. Mm-hmm. And I think it was 30 to 45 minutes. And we just went through a couple of things. She asked if I knew about this, mm-hmm. about that, what I knew about Davie, and chatted a little bit. And she was just like, so do you understand that this role, it's like a temporary thing? And
right, because it was a temporary contract role to begin with.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I understand. And she's like, but if, depending on where we are with our staff and everything, we could decide to keep you on when the contract ends. And I was like, yeah, that all sounds great.
And they did, and here you are.
They did.
Yeah.
And that process was a whole different thing because when they decided to keep me on, I got pulled into the office with our, at the time, manager mm-hmm. and then my direct supervisor, mm-hmm. which was funny because my direct supervisor came to my desk and she went, hey, can I borrow you in our manager's office? And I said, is everything okay?
Yeah. You're getting called to the principal's office, right? You want to make sure you haven't done something wrong.
Am I in trouble?
Right.
And she went, no. You're not in trouble. And so she dragged me into the office and I sat down. And I had our manager over here and my boss right in here.
Right.
And I sat there and they both stared at me and smiled. And I was like, this is terrifying. What is happening? I felt like they were milking it a little bit.
They might have been having a little fun.
They will deny it to their
Of course they will.
dying day. I know they will. But they were absolutely having some fun. And so then my manager was like, we'd like to keep you on. Would you be interested? And
Yeah.
so that whole thing. And so I came on as a full-time employee with Davy, but I was still temporary.
Okay.
Because they were still,
Working out
things and
Right,
all that stuff. And then it was maybe a month or so later that they're like, just
You're here.
make her
Yeah,
permanent.
the thing that I remember, your experience, not only with the recruiting firm, but with Davy, is everything that you were told was the truth.
Yes.
You weren't made false promises.
No.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to just give the people the right expectation and then they understand, right?
Yeah. And when they first brought me in to ask if I wanted to come on with them,
Right.
I remember sitting there and I was like, so what benefits do I get with this?
Sure.
What's the timeline?
Right.
How does this work? And so they laid everything out for me.
Yeah.
They're like, because we're an ESOP, so
Right.
they're like, you can start doing stock at this point because we also keep your seniority. Because so the day that I started
Right.
as the external
Right.
contingent worker is my anniversary date with the company.
Yeah. Okay.
That time frame between when I started there to when they brought me on
Right.
is counted for time working with
That's
them.
incredibly professional.
Yeah. And that would have been, March.
90 days?
Something like that,
Yeah.
3 or 4 months.
So just night and day from your past experiences that has set you
Yeah.
up for this successful run. Well, Sam, thank you. I've got two closing questions.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
All right. You're an animal lover.
Yes.
I mean, dogs, cats, horses, right? What animal do you hate?
Snakes.
Snakes.
Keep them away from me.
Keep them away from you.
They don't have legs. They slither around. They
Okay.
smell air with their tongue. I'm not down with it.
Now, there's another animal that you don't particularly care for.
What are you about to bring up?
They peck dirt.
Oh. Listen, just because I think chickens are only good fried and on a plate.
Okay. You're not a chicken fan.
No.
Don't want chickens.
No.
And then the other one that I'll never forget, you referring to pigeons as sky rats.
And I stand by that.
Okay. All right. Here's our closing question. What's your favorite cuss word?
Oh, gosh. How bad can we get here? I'm just open floor, kind of.
Have at it. Okay. It's my daughter. That's my daughter.
You raised me. You
I
should
know.
have known what that
I
was
know.
going to be.
Although, let's be clear, your first cuss words you learned from your mother. But
I
we
did.
won't tell that
I
story
did.
here. Well, you have just heard it right straight from a former job candidate. If your company's doing any of these things that you heard here, you need to take a hard look at yourself and say, what are we doing wrong? If you're not hiring people, if you're having trouble, look internally first and then look at the job pool second. Part 2, we're going to have Catherine Burek on, my dear friend, and she's going to talk to us about it from the professional side. She used to be HR in many large companies, and now she runs a private consulting practice and sees this at a whole different level. So make sure you log in for part 2. Thanks for joining us on the Value Bridge podcast.
You have been listening to the Value Bridge podcast, a monthly 45 minutes or less of pithy, relevant, and helpful advice on everything business.